On September 26, 1983, deep in the night, inside an underground bunker outside Moscow, a monitor screen suddenly lit up with a red warning: launch. The computers showed that the United States had just fired a ballistic missile toward the Soviet Union. A minute later, a second alarm went off, then a third, a fourth, a fifth. The man sitting in front of that screen had only a few minutes to decide whether to report the start of a nuclear war up the chain of command or not. This is the true story of a man many historians credit with single-handedly preventing a full-scale nuclear war, and a man almost nobody knew about for the next 40 years. To understand just how terrifying that night really was, you need the context. It happened only 3 weeks after Soviet forces shot down a Korean passenger airliner that had strayed into Soviet airspace. All 269 people on board were killed, including a sitting United States congressman. Relations between the Soviet Union and the United States were at one of the tensest points of the entire Cold War. Both sides were on edge. Both sides were primed to believe the worst about each other. It was on exactly this kind of night that Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov of the Soviet Air Defense Forces began his shift at the command center of the secret Serpukhov 15 facility outside Moscow. Petrov's job was to monitor a network of early warning satellites, constantly scanning United States territory for the heat signature of a ballistic missile launch. And that night, the system triggered. The screen lit up, reporting the launch of a single missile from United States territory. The system's confidence level for the threat was marked as the highest possible. A minute later, the alarm went off again, then again, and again. In total, the system was now reporting 5 ballistic missiles launched, heading toward the Soviet Union. By protocol, Petrov's job was simple and unambiguous: report the launch up the chain of command. From there, an immediate retaliatory nuclear strike would almost certainly follow. Petrov later recalled, "For 15 seconds, we were in a state of shock. We needed to understand what's next. And in those exact seconds, he made a decision that went against direct protocol. Instead of immediately passing the alarm up the chain, he decided to wait for additional confirmation from other monitoring systems, confirmation that, in theory, should have come. This decision went directly against his official duties. If he was wrong, and this really was an actual attack, Soviet leadership would have far less time to respond. The full responsibility for that pause would rest on him alone. So why did Petrov doubt the system's readings in the first place? He later explained his reasoning came down to 2 simple points. First, he reasoned that if the United States were truly launching a real nuclear attack, they wouldn't do it with just 5 missiles. A genuine first strike would look completely different, massive and overwhelming, not a handful of isolated launches. Second, ground-based radar stations, which were supposed to independently confirm any incoming missiles, showed absolutely no signs of an attack. Relying on that reasoning, and not on the technical certainty of the equipment, Petrov reported up the chain that this was a false alarm. And he was right. Later, when the incident was investigated, the real cause of the malfunction came to light. One of the early warning satellites had mistaken the reflection of sunlight off high-altitude clouds for the heat signature of an intercontinental ballistic missile launch. An ordinary natural phenomenon, sunlight reflecting off clouds in a particular way, had nearly triggered a full-scale nuclear war between 2 superpowers. You might expect that a man whose calm judgment saved, without exaggeration, millions of lives would be celebrated as a national hero. Instead, the opposite happened. Rather than being praised, Petrov was reprimanded by his superiors, criticized for not properly documenting every detail of the incident in the chaotic minutes while it was unfolding. Soviet officials treated the entire event as a closely guarded secret, one that would stay hidden for years, well past the collapse of the Soviet Union itself. Almost nobody knew about it for more than a decade, until the early 1990s, when a former commander of the Soviet early warning system first spoke publicly about that night in his memoirs. Petrov himself, notably, never considered himself a hero. He once said that if he had been formally recognized at the time, someone else would likely have had to take the blame for the system's failure, quite possibly the very scientists who had designed it. In the years that followed, Petrov's personal life took a difficult turn. He eventually retired from military service to care for his wife, who had been diagnosed with cancer. She passed away in 1997. Afterward, he lived a quiet, modest life, alone, in a small two-room apartment in Fryazino, a town outside Moscow, getting by on a state pension. It wasn't until 2004 that Petrov received any formal recognition at all, when the San Francisco-based Association of World Citizens gave him an award for the part he played in averting catastrophe. In 2006, he traveled to the United Nations in New York to be honored in person. In 2011, he received the German Media Award in Baden-Baden, and in 2013, 3 decades after that night in the bunker, he was awarded the Dresden Peace Prize in Germany. A 2014 documentary blending real interviews with dramatized reenactments told his story to a much wider audience. During the years surrounding its production, this quiet, unassuming retired officer found himself meeting Hollywood figures like Kevin Costner, Robert De Niro, and Matt Damon, an almost surreal turn for a man who had spent decades living in obscurity. Stanislav Petrov died in 2017 at the age of 77. Remarkably, even his death went largely unnoticed for months, until a friend in Germany posted about it online, and the news finally made headlines around the world. The following year, in 2018, he was posthumously awarded the Future of Life Award in New York. If you think about it, this whole story isn't really about the loud decisions of presidents or generals. It's about one specific man, sitting alone in front of a blinking red screen in the middle of the night, who had only a few minutes to choose between blindly trusting a machine and trusting his own sober judgment. The fate of humanity hung by a thread that night, and what held it together wasn't a weapon, wasn't a defense system, wasn't a politician's decision. It was one man's pause, one man who decided not to rush to press the button. If you enjoyed this journey into one of the most underrated stories of the Cold War, subscribe. There are many more stories like this coming. And let me know in the comments, which story should I dig into next?